I saw a video of you on T.D. Jakes' show that's on the Oprah Network. And you said, and I want to be correct in the quote, you said you didn't like the phrase taking America back. Can you explain that to me? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, because that phrase confuses me. When I hear that, it's confusing to me. As a Black woman who knows her history, I'm confused by that. You want to take America back. I don't really know what that means, because my understanding of history and I think their understanding of history might be a little bit different.
Are you liberal or conservative?
I'm liberal.
You're liberal?
Proudly.
And what is a liberal? Especially for a millennial, what is define liberal?
So I'd rather, if we're going to attach titles, I'd rather attach progressive, right?
Okay.
Versus liberal. I am a woman. I'm a Black woman. And my opinions, I cannot detach how I self-identify and how the world identifies me from the way that I feel politically, the welfare of people, about our quality of life, about our access to education, to be able to fulfill the rights entitled to us by the promise that this nation made.
Is there a difference between a progressive and a liberal?
I think that you can find nuances, and I think that that's also depends on people's, personal identifications.
Right.
What we're learning more and more in this political process is that the more we try to pigeonhole people into, specific labels, the more folks want to break out from it. I think we're in a time where now folks are less concerned about titles and more concerned about the issues.
I noticed that a lot of my friends who were liberals are now calling themselves progressive. And I remember when the word liberal became so negative, it was like, I think it became embarrassing to them. So they started to call themselves progressive, but yet they have the same mentality and they do the same thing. The name changed, but my friends didn't change.
I think it's important to be able to, switch the labels and the self-identifiers as we so please, particularly as their meanings change in mainstream media. And I think what's important about that is not necessarily the fact that media says all, but if we look at the entities that control the narratives, if how I've self-identified is now being largely identified in a culture as something that's different than how I identify, then it behooves me to find an application of that definition that best fits me.
There's a lot of talk about the voter ID laws.
Yes.
And we heard a lot about it in this last election.
Yeah.
And what do you think about the voter ID laws? Is there a problem with them?
Oh, absolutely. It's abysmal.
It's
abysmal. To go from, the Voting Rights Act in the 60s, did my parents the same thing, to now think that in my lifetime, we're still fighting some of those same battles. I think that it's cowardly for, Republican state houses and all of them, all state houses who have enacted voter ID laws since 2014 have been all Republican state houses.
Right.
I think that it's cowardly for them to preach on one hand and feel so confident that their message resonates with Black and brown communities, with marginalized communities, and then enact legislation that further suppresses their ability to align with the people who they say that they feel so confident in aligning with. I think that anytime you limit access and equity, particularly in the United States of America, I think you've got to have, a moral conversation with yourself.
If I'm thinking about this correctly, voter ID laws mean that you have to show an ID in order to vote, right?
Yes.
I don't understand what's the problem with that. What's wrong with because we have so many illegals here now. We have people coming into the country who are not citizens. What's wrong with, and especially with Black people, what's the problem with showing an ID in order to vote? How is that hurting them?
So I don't have an issue with needing to verify your identification, but I would just like it to be consistent across the board.
Meaning
there are certain states. I believe North Carolina was one of them, where at Texas, Louisiana, I could continue going on, where they have enacted laws where only certain specific pieces of identification are allowed and will be, verified. A state issue ID will not be, but a passport will be. A student ID card from the university that you attend will not be.
Is it difficult for college kids to get a state issued ID?
It is not. It is. I think difficult. You get into a gray area, right? Like difficult.
Yeah.
Is it easily accessed? Probably not as simple. I know what it's like to be a person who owns her own business and has to go to the DMV in Los Angeles. And I know I don't go to the DMV. I know I go to AAA because the DMV and some of those social services, it's difficult for us to get the kind of service that we need that falls in line with the things that we have to do during the day. What my point about voter ID, what makes it so abysmal, is that it's like playing a game with equity and access to our rights. Voting is a right. So to create all of these different, checks, to me, when addresses and identity can be easily verified, to me is just silly.
Do you personally believe that a person should have to show an ID in order to vote, or should they be able to just walk in there and vote?
I think that people that you should have to verify your identity.
And how would you do that?
I think that's a tough question, because different states have different requirements for identification that they accept. I just don't think that government IDs should be, told. I don't know. I'm losing my train of thought. I don't think that government IDs should be disqualified. I don't think that we should try to find alternative forms of identification when we have some already that are in place.
Yeah.
And furthermore, I don't think that there should be any changes to voter identification and the system thereof, because if you look at the numbers and the statistics and the occasions where there have been voter fraud or voter issues, it has not been because people walked up and tried to vote illegally.
There is one thing that I think is a negative image of Black Americans, and I hear it in the media a lot, especially during voting season. They say that Black people should not have to show an ID in order to vote. And they say, well, because some Blacks, they can't get down to the DMV, or they can't do this or that. And it makes Black people seem dumb and kind of lazy and out of it to take away that responsibility. And I don't like that, because, Blacks are smart. They can take care of business. What do you think about that image that they put out there about Blacks when it comes to voting? The ID, voting ID.
Well, firstly, I want to be very careful when talking about issues of equity and access, that we don't attribute false narratives to that. I think that is it true that marginalized and disenfranchised communities have difficulty adjusting their already tight schedules with all of their responsibilities to add another thing to their day, to go and, wait in line at a social service, place like the DMV.
Some cases they'll come to you.
If they can come to them, I think that that's a great thing. But I think that we need to be careful in attributing things. Like I don't. When I hear narratives like you said, I don't attribute those to what I know to be Black America. That's not the Black America.
You hear the NAACP and others talking about Black folks, and that we shouldn't have to require them to go out and get an ID in order to vote. And so in some states, they made it easier so that the folks can go to you and register you to get an ID, and yet they just seem to like that. Are you embarrassed that Blacks are presented in that way?
I'm not embarrassed because I'm not embarrassed by that. I think do I reject narratives that I feel like do not accurately depict my people? Yes.
Yeah.
I do reject those narratives.
I saw a video of you on T.D. Jakes' show that's on the Oprah Network. And you said, and I want to be correct in the quote, you said you didn't like the phrase taking America back. Can you explain that to me? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, because that phrase confuses me. I want to know. I want to know who they're when it is said. When I have heard it said, let me qualify.
Right.
Let me qualify the quote. When I have heard "Let's take America back" again, I heard it most pervasively during the 2016 election cycle from Trump supporters at Trump rallies and rallies of the alt-right.
Right.
And so when I hear that, it's confusing to me. As a Black woman who knows her history, I'm confused by that. You want to take America back. I don't really know what that means, because my understanding of history, and I think their understanding of history, might be a little bit different.
Have you ever asked anyone who said that or used that phrase, what do you mean take America back?
I have.
And what did they say? What type of response have you got?
Normally I get, some runarounds. It normally has to do with, big government,
right?
Bringing government back to the people. Which as a strategist I know to be buzzwords. I mean, those are the kinds of sayings that my colleagues and I stood up in our offices and create, and folks end up putting on posters and T-shirts.